Hey guys, in this video, I want to give you a couple of tips for naturally putting on healthy weight. When it comes to weight problems, not everybody is dealing with the problem of excess, so an accumulation of unwanted and unnecessary body weight or body fat. There are also a handful of people, if not an equal amount of people, who have a difficult time gaining weight who are underweight. And although the media, the scientific community, and people in general seem to be more fixated on the problem of weight gain and how to lose fat or lose weight, the fact of the matter is the inability to gain weight and unnecessary or rapid weight loss can be a problem too, and a sign or symptom of metabolic stress. And actually both the inability to lose weight and inability to gain weight are both symptoms of poor or inefficient metabolic function. You see, it's the metabolism as a whole that dictates your weight and the energy balance of the body. In the simplest of terms, the primary goal of the metabolism is to produce energy. And one of the major sources of fuel for that energy production is, of course, the food that we eat. And the basic job of the metabolism is to dictate the rate of digestion, to break down the food we eat into the various nutrients and micro and macronutrients, for those nutrients to be oxidized and turned into energy. And when the metabolism is working efficiently, this conversion of food and nutrients into energy results in little to no waste. But when the metabolism slows down or is impaired, the body is less efficient at converting our food into energy, which results in anabolic issues, so problems with growth and development and putting on healthy weight, but it can also result in an increased storage or accumulation of unused energy or food. But we're not going to be focusing too much on the problem of weight gain and how to lose weight in this video. If you're interested more in how to lose weight in a healthy way, definitely be sure to reference other videos on the YouTube channel or our healthy weight loss course. Otherwise, taking a look more on the catabolistic side of things, the problem with not being able to gain weight or losing weight although you don't want to. You see, this is still a problem of metabolic stress. However, the basic difference, at least that I see, in the person that has a hard time gaining weight than the person that has a hard time losing weight, although both of their metabolisms are not working efficiently, is that the person that's trying to gain weight, their low metabolic condition is driven by a high stress load. It's usually accompanied by hyperadrenalism. So the inability to gain weight, metabolically speaking, is a condition of hyperadrenalism and hypothyroidism. So the adrenals, in other words, the primary stress glands in the body, will compensate when the thyroid is low. And in most cases of hypothyroidism or low thyroidism, where the thyroid is not producing enough thyroid hormone, or it's just not having its cellular effect in the body, this can lead to metabolic issues where the body doesn't efficiently break down food or use food efficiently for energy purposes. So there's always a subtle imbalance between the adrenals and thyroid in all sorts of hypothyroidism, even the overweight person. But with the problem of not being able to gain weight, usually the hyperadrenalism is a bit more dramatized. So usually what's going on is something similar to Cushing's disease, where the adrenals are incredibly overactive, which will, ironically enough, increase the metabolism or the metabolic rate. So what I see is that the person that has a hard time gaining weight, they're generally hypothyroid and their metabolic rate is low overall. If you were to check their pulse and their body temperature, you'd find that the readings are generally low. However, in the person that is maybe still hypothyroid, their thyroid's not working efficiently, but they have a high rate of metabolism, it's because their adrenals are overactive and the metabolism is being increased in an almost pseudo fashion, or more or less a stressful fashion, by the overproduction of adrenal stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So this is something I've talked about in the past in, I think, FAQ videos, which is that there is a condition of what I would call a false high metabolic rate, where the basic biomarkers of the metabolism, like the pulse rate, the body temperature, are high. And maybe you're even breaking down food at a rapid rate, but it's governed by the overproduction of stress hormones, not so much the production of thyroid hormone. And this is actually a condition that I see quite often. It's something that I actually experienced as well. Whenever I become overly stressed, I notice that I have a tendency to become more hyperadrenal, low thyroid, whereas some people just become lower thyroid and the metabolic rate slows down altogether. I find that my hypothyroidism has always been driven by hyperadrenalism and the excess production of these stress hormones, which would cause me to start to lose weight pretty rapidly. So in other words, I'm the type of person where if I become stressed at all, I have a tendency more to lose weight and have a lack of appetite. And there's explanations for this actually. And one of the major reasons that this can be problematic, not just with your weight, but your health overall, is that the stress hormones that are increasing the metabolic rate and maybe keeping you skinny and thinner and making it possible for you to eat a whole pizza or something and not gain weight are the same stress hormones that are ultimately decreasing your appetite while chronically lowering the pulse rate, the heart rate, the metabolic rate. So although you might notice that, you're not maybe gaining weight and you have an easy time avoiding the accumulation of body weight and you never get fat, you might notice other negative symptoms like constipation, anxiety or depression or fluctuation between those, problems with the hair and skin, problems with circulation, so always feeling cold or being cold intolerant, and of course, chronic fatigue. So the inability to gain weight, from what I see, is a really interesting condition where the metabolism is high, yet the thyroid is low. But the simplest way to look at it is the metabolism is high because of stress. So in the same way that you might feel incredibly energized or euphoric if you get scared or if you have a surge of adrenaline in your body, is the same way that the metabolic rate might be increasing and helping you to metabolize your food really fast. This is also putting the body in a more chronically catabolistic metabolic state. So for some people, it's not really a problem. Some people enjoy the fact that they're never going to get fat and that they never had a problem with gaining weight. But some people, like myself, have never really enjoyed the weight loss effects of being low thyroid or high stress and want to figure out what to do about it. And the good news is that it's actually a very simple fix. Now, the only thing that might be difficult down the line is figuring out what is the primary stress triggering the hyperactivity of the adrenal glands. But if you look at what happens hormonally speaking, there are a couple of very simple things that you can do. So remember, the basic stress hormones that are being increased under hyperadrenalism, driving the false high rate of metabolism, are usually hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones will increase the metabolic rate in a stressful way. They'll increase your heart rate, get your heart pumping, probably at an uncomfortable rate, almost feeling like you're having heart palpitations maybe, and contribute to feelings like anxiety followed by fatigue. So the thing you're going to want to ultimately do is bring down the chronic production of these stress substances while actively nourishing the thyroid gland, so that way you still have a healthy metabolic rate overall, but one that is driven by the protective thyroid hormone and not the stressful catabolistic stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress substances. So this is the primary goal. You're going to want to decrease the production of the cortisol and adrenaline, which are, interestingly enough, not just causing you to lose fat and avoid putting on excess fat, but the problem with these stress hormones is that not only are they rapidly breaking down fat in the body and avoiding the accumulation of fat, but they can have catabolistic effects on the tissue as well. So they can lead to muscle wasting, and you might find that down the line, not only are you losing weight, but you're starting to lose muscle. Maybe your butt's wasting away, or other important muscles on the body, which would not only result in problems aesthetically, and it's usually not just the muscle tissue that's breaking down from the hyperadrenalism, but it's also other important tissue like the skin tissue. Now, something else that's a problematic factor in hyperadrenalism, or having a really fast metabolism driven by stress, which results in the inability to gain weight, is usually high serotonin levels. So serotonin is one of the many stress substances secreted under stress. It has a feedback loop with cortisol, so usually as one goes up, the other goes up, and serotonin is a classic metabolic suppressing hormone in the body. So although the cortisol and adrenaline might be temporarily increasing the heart rate and prevent the body from storing excess body fat, the serotonin is having a systemic anti-metabolic effect, and this can actually decrease your appetite, which is a classic feature I see of people that have the inability to gain weight and that are more hyperadrenal active, which is that they don't feel very hungry. So it's interesting because they have this pseudo false high metabolism, but they show all the other classic signs of a low metabolism, and one of the classic ones is being not hungry often or having a very low appetite. And this is obviously problematic on a very practical level, because if you're trying to gain weight and you have no appetite, you're not going to be able to increase your caloric intake to help increase the rate of metabolism and to also buffer some of the effects of stress. So it creates a pretty vicious cycle where the stress hormones are increasing the production of these other hormones like serotonin, which is decreasing the appetite, which is a vicious cycle to break. Anybody that's ever tried to force feed themselves when they're not hungry knows that it's almost nauseating. So getting into some pragmatical tips for correcting this imbalance, keep in mind that the basic thing occurring in the person that can't gain weight is that they are in a chronically high rate of catabolism. Catabolism is the breaking down side of the metabolism. So the body is breaking down more than it's building up. And as we talk about in our healthy weight loss course, the rate of metabolism is dictated by the hormones in your body. So as we mentioned, the hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, they're going to increase the rate of catabolism. So they will drive up the rate of metabolism, just more on the catabolistic and breaking down side, which explains the wasting condition you see in somebody who can't gain weight. Their body is wasting more muscle, breaking down more fat, more protein than it is building up. Hence the problem of not being able to gain weight. So what you're going to want to do is decrease the overproduction of these stress hormones, primarily the cortisol, adrenaline, and other adrenal stress hormones. The thing you're going to ultimately want to do is decrease the stress. Remember, stress increases your body's demands for energy. It literally increases your cell's requirement for glucose, the primary energy substrate your cells use to make energy. And something that I see sort of reoccurring in the person who has a hard time gaining weight is that they are generally expending more energy than they're taking in. So it's really just an energy imbalance here, where the person who can't gain weight, they just put out more energy than they take in. And that energy output is the stress of, let's say, physical exercise. So if you're somebody that exercises a lot, or if you're hyperactive mentally and you're using a lot of brain glucose, or if you're exposed to any sort of stress, this is going to increase your body's demands for energy. And if you're not supplying that body with the increased requirements of energy, then your body is going to break down. So the basic thing here is about correcting this energy imbalance. You can either decrease the stress or increase the energy supply to cope with that stress. So pragmatically speaking, if you're somebody who exercises a lot, you're expending a lot of energy and you're increasing the production of stress hormones that increase that need of energy. And if you're not fulfilling that need, you're going to run into a deficit. You're going to start losing more and more and more weight. So it's really just about a simple energy imbalance where basically your body is using more energy than it's getting back. But this is dictated by these stress hormones. So you have a couple of very pragmatical things you can do. You can exercise less, you can find ways to decrease the stress, or you just become more proactive in replenishing the energy to cope with that stress. So for example, something that a lot of people do because of misinformation in mainstream health is they overtrain and undereat. That's a classic recipe for hypothyroidism and hyperadrenalism. Sure, you're going to lose weight, but you're also going to lose weight at the expense of your health. So you don't want to do that. One thing you're going to want to do is just make sure that you're increasing your intake of calories in the simplest of sense. If you're spending a lot of energy, if you're stressed out a lot, you need more calories and more energy to cope with that stress. One of the #1 ways that people get hypothyroidism, dietarily speaking, is because they're too low calorie. This decreases the metabolic rate. So as simple as it is, the basic tip that everyone would probably give you in this regard is eat more calories. But you're going to want to eat the right sort of calories. You don't want to just eat junk food calories that further lead to metabolic issues, because although you might gain some weight now, you might be causing other problems with your metabolism. Remember, your metabolism has 10,000 plus functions, so energy and weight balance is just one of them. You don't want to try to correct that one imbalance and then cause a bunch of other ones. And I find that one of the simplest ways to put on healthy weight without running into metabolic issues is a combination of starches and fats. So eating well-cooked potatoes and adding some grass-fed butter to it is a good way to increase your calories and also increase the rate of metabolism in a more anabolic phase, away from the catabolistic breaking down phase. So the classic steak and potato meal is going to be a good way to put on healthy weight without running into metabolic and digestive issues. Another very helpful tip would be to take a look at your digestive system. One thing that tends to happen when people are hyperadrenal is they get leaky gut and they run into malabsorption issues. Cortisol can lead to leaky gut by catabolizing the intestinal tract, and this can cause malabsorption and just contribute to the fact that the body doesn't have enough energy to build up healthy new tissue. So leaky gut could be a big one, and being overactive or hyperadrenal is one of the major causes of digestive issues. So definitely check out our Perfect Digestion course, which will help to correct any sort of malabsorption issues. The third thing I'm going to recommend is taking a look at serotonin levels. Now, usually serotonin increases under the presence of gut inflammation. And like I said earlier, serotonin is going to suppress your appetite. So if serotonin is really high, you're probably going to have no appetite. And this is why some people who get stressed out, don't have any appetite is because there's a greater increase of serotonin, because they maybe are more prone to psychosomatic imbalances where the stress is triggering a gut issue like IBS. Whereas some people get an increased sense of appetite under stress because they don't secrete much serotonin and their body's more in tune in the sense that when they're stressed, they need more energy to cope with the stress. So if you're somebody that doesn't have any appetite, then you're going to want to correct that, of course, that way you can eat more calories to put on weight. And the thing that you're going to want to take a look at is serotonin levels. And there are herbs like ginkgo biloba that will lower serotonin, but I would recommend generally just improving digestive health. If you have high serotonin, you can guarantee that your digestive system probably has some sort of inflammation occurring. So in conclusion, the basic reason you can't gain weight is because your body is highly stressed. And stress increases the demand for energy, and usually in the highly stressed person not putting on weight, they're just not supplying the body with that increased energy supply that it needs to handle the stress to avoid catabolism. And this catabolism is usually dictated by the hormonal imbalance or endocrine imbalance where the adrenals are hyperactive and the thyroid is low. So correcting this imbalance by lowering the production of adrenal stress hormones and improving thyroid function should help correct any sort of weight imbalances on either end of the spectrum. So I'm going to recommend that you check out our healthy weight loss course actually for correcting either one of these issues, which is really just a course on healthy weight. It's going to help you achieve a healthy weight in either direction. So if you're overweight, it'll help bring you down to an ideal weight. And if you're underweight, it'll bring you up to a normal and healthy weight by correcting the major hormonal imbalances that cause weight problems in the first place. Otherwise, if you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel for future videos. And for learning more beyond this YouTube channel, remember we have a blog, an online tonic herb shop, an online wellness academy, all which you can find in the description box below.